What's up, everyone? How's it going? It's a wonderful Monday. Hope you had a great Sunday. I'm Chandler Boyce. I'm here with two amazing guys, Tommy and Greg, and today we are going to be talking about how to close the back door to your church. Obviously, we want to have a big front door, but just as important as that is we also want to make sure that we have a no back door, very small back door, and that we are attracting people, but also engaging them and getting them plugged in. So, guys, great to have you on. Look forward to the conversation today, and look forward to learning a little bit.
Greg, why don't you introduce yourself first, because you're the longtime expert here.
You got it. Long time. Yeah. Make me
I'm not
feel
saying
old.
anything.
That
I don't mean
long
anything by it.
Experienced.
You're the ancient expert here. Ironically, I've not moved into a role where people will turn to me about closing the back door till about 11 years ago, when the church that I basically grew up at and pastored their daughter church, we remerged with that church 11 years ago at a new location for both churches, combined our forces. And we were 3,200 when we combined our attendance. And 7 years later, we were 12,000, became the second fastest growing church in the country. And my role, for the first time in my life, it was a passion, but I don't know how equipped I was basically to close the back door. And how do you connect that many people as they're rapidly coming? And we were baptizing in crescendo, getting up to 1,000 people a year. It was amazing, but I had to, because people saw what was happening and turning to us and says, "What are you doing?" that I had to not only be able to share what we were doing, but I felt called to take on the challenge of sharing it in a way that would transcend scale and culture. In other words, it didn't matter where the church was or how big or small it was. This is what will help connect people and close the back door. So that's what I've been doing for the last 11, going on 12 years of my life. And I absolutely love it at Eastside Christian Church in Anaheim, California.
Well, I'm Tommy. I met Greg about 10 years ago when I was a pastor of adult ministry in Ventura, California, also on the good old West Coast that I miss very much. But I was new to groups ministry to start. And what I realized really quickly was that I couldn't get anybody into a group if they didn't identify as like somebody that was really a member of the church. We were a brand new church, 2 years old. And everything was awesome. We grew 20% every year that I was there. But the real question was, are we growing by 20% or are we growing by 40 and losing 20 of that, or so on and so forth? And so really quickly, I realized I had to get anybody in groups and have a great groups experience. I had to move like down the line toward the newcomer and the guest so that I could actually get them all the way in. Because being in a group, I thought was a straightforward step. And it turns out it wasn't at all, especially because we were reaching people far from God. They didn't have a context for church, and especially for showing up at somebody's house and trying to figure out how to share their life and spiritual life and all that. That was just unknown completely. And so I had to step it back. And that's when I found Greg. I found out about the assimilation system he was running, and it all started to make a lot of sense. And so I was just a huge fan, and then I became a friend, and then we started doing this together, and it's been a blast. But that's my experience: assimilation, groups, pastoral care. I got to run all those, and I'm not at that church anymore. I'm in Tennessee now, but I get to work with lots of churches in this area and a few others as well, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Hey, so before we kind of get into what I would say specifics or actionable items, things that you can do, we want to make sure that we add value. Greg, why don't you kind of give us your definition, some context about assimilation? What does that actually mean? Kind of break that down so we all kind of have a starting point or a foundational point as we jump into the rest of this conversation.
Well, I think especially for your listeners that are working on creating community and attracting new people through social media and other means, that once they get there, assimilation is the journey of a first-time guest in becoming a connected serving member. And so it's turning a first-time guest into a connected serving member, and those are measurable. Connected in most churches means in a small group. And most churches today, but if you're a more traditional church, it could mean in a adult Bible class on Sundays, or if you're maybe a seeker-driven church, it's a Wednesday night believer service, or whatever your network of community is. It's very measurable. What does connected mean? So you can measure that. Connected. Serving means they're volunteering, and members, whatever your church's polity or concept of membership is, all three of those are measurable. And so it's that journey of a first-time guest towards becoming a connected serving member. And what's really interesting about assimilation and engagement is whatever process or system you put in place, which is what we've done and what we help churches do, is it's not another, you're not adding another ministry to the church. In other words, oh, you know what? We need to get approval to add a ministry, a whole new area of ministry to the church. I always tell people, if you look at the church like a body, through the New Testament lens, that assimilation is not adding another organ. We tend to see the organs or parts of the body as different ministries many times in the church. It's not adding another one. It's really the circulation system that pumps new blood to all those organs. And those organs have to be connected to it to experience that life. And so thinking of assimilation not as another department, ministry, or part or organ of the body, it is the circulation system by which the body sustains itself, finds nourishment, and new blood is pumped to all those things.
Yeah, that was exactly what hooked me originally. I mean, and what I realized with groups, that describes that whole situation that I was in. I couldn't get people in because they were missing pieces. And what I found was a missing level or layer of ownership and creativity. We were really creative in ministries, and we were really creative at sort of these end goals for people and creating a great experience. Once you got into a group, great experience. Once you became a volunteer, phenomenal experience, right? Leadership development, great experience. But there was this gap that nobody owned. Nobody was in charge of it. Nobody was creatively thinking, how do we move people? They were just thinking, once we land them, this is great. But there was that whole missing factor. And of course, that actually does start with reaching people who are far from God, which I think is a great sort of partnership with something like what you do, Chandler, like actually helping make sure that we're portraying the church to the outside world in the right way, and not creating a bunch of missing pieces in that part of the pipeline for somebody. Because when you think about it, discipleship really is just the entire process of becoming more like Jesus. And that includes when God's pursuing you before you're pursuing him. So evangelism is just a subset of discipleship. And that's why all of that matters. But at the same time, then, when somebody does show up, someone who's broken, searching, seeking, hurting, they need something, like, then it's our job to do something with them. And the reality is that we can never make a disciple if we never connect them first, because connection always, every single time, precedes discipleship. And that was, it becomes sort of a painful realization at some point when you realize you've been trying to disciple people, but you skipped the connecting part, or you try to connect them, but in a way that's just not actually getting enough people, or enough people effectively actually down that line. Because not only do we have to connect to Jesus, we have to connect to his people, because outside of the church, outside of his body on earth, we just don't have anything. And so you start to scale that up, like that principle. And I think you start to realize that disconnection is pretty much the biggest obstacle to mission fulfillment in the church. If we're going to get anything done, if we're going to make disciples, if we're going to change the world, all of that, it has to start with connecting people to the body. And before that, it really does start with reaching, because the connection process means we have to reach them. And so I'd love for you, I mean, just so this can feel really sort of all encompassing, like you've got some fantastic, easy things to do that it depends on how you look at it. Either reach more guests, like potential guests, or make sure that you don't send them away when they're looking for you. But I'd love for you to hit those, because they're such a good way to start this process.
Yeah, and I want to say this as a compliment to you guys, just even having this conversation about assimilation. You know, my wife is on staff at our church, and she's over small groups. And so this conversation has stirred my thinking for even for our church. And I actually just had a conversation with my pastor yesterday, because we had our we call it Welcome to the Family. It's where we invite people if you want to get involved and call Trademark Church your home, this is the dinner, this is the place for you. And so we were actually talking through how do we get these new people plugged in and connected as fast as possible. Because in the culture we live in, things are moving so fast. And so the faster and the more opportunities we can give new people to connect, meet staff, meet leaders, take that next step, plug in, whatever that next step is, join a small group, join a team, come to a pastor party, however, growth track, whatever kind of next step that you have places. And so I appreciate, and I've these conversations in the relationship has really even sparked some ideas of, man, what are some things, some ways even digitally, that we can assimilate people faster, whether that's they're new, whether that's they want to lead a small group, whether that's they want to join a team, or they need to get baptized, discipleship, leadership. And so we've kind of started that conversation, which is exciting because it's actually sparked some ideas in my head that I'm sure other people are doing, things you guys have shared, that I'm like, man, we've got to utilize the digital space, not just to reach people, but also to assimilate them, get them plugged in, get them connected, and do that faster and quicker than we can or could if it's just, hey, come to this night once a month or once a quarter. But I do want to give some simple to-dos that really anybody can do. Any pastor, anybody listening, you're like, when it comes to online digital marketing, I have no idea where to start, what to do, what do I need to outsource, what can we do inside. So the first thing that I always talk about, whether it's, I'm working with the church or it's, in my master class, the number one thing and the most important thing you can do every week is what you would hear hear a marketer person say: optimizing your Google business profile. When you hear the word optimizing, that just means updating, staying on top of that Google business profile. So it's a free profile. If you don't have it, there's some steps, and I'll share some. I'll give everybody listening, if you are interested and you want to do this, I have a PDF that I'll give that will walk you step by step exactly how to do this. But the first thing is going to be your Google business profile, updating that, making sure that it is completely filled out. The description, make sure you have you upload photos, because most people, before they go anywhere, a restaurant, a church, a business, they're going to go on Google, they're going to search, and they're going to look at, okay, what do the reviews look like? What do the photos look like? Does this place look like somewhere that I want to go? And that's just how our culture is now. Like, even if your best friend, if you ask your best friend, hey, what's the best Italian spot in Fort Worth? They're going to tell you. Even if they tell you and you believe them and trust them, you're still probably going to go on Google and you're going to check out their website. You're going to check out the menu. And that's what people are doing across the board. And so making sure that your outward facing profiles, whether that's, Google, your website, that they are updated, that they have the correct keywords in there. So that way you're telling Google, hey, when someone searches for a church around our church, we want to show up. We want to be at the top. So that's one of the easiest things. The other thing would be also just SEO on your website, making sure that this might be a little bit more technical, but your H1 tags, your meta descriptions, making sure that each page is being titled correctly for what you're trying to show up for. So whether that's kids activities, whether that's, church, non-denominational church, Christian church, whatever those things are, you need to make sure that your website is optimized for those as well. I would also say that on your website, make sure that there is a very easy, clear next step. Like, you need to tell people what you need them to do, whether that's, hey, click here, fill out this form, subscribe to our newsletter. Hey, let us know you're coming on Sunday. It needs to be dumb, obvious on what next step that you want someone on your website to do, so that way they actually do it and not just come to your website and leave. The next thing I would say is social media. One, and this is really with anything in life, number one is being consistent. Number two is creating content and adding value. If you're just using your social media as a billboard, as a digital sign, no one's going to follow, like, share, comment, anything. So you got to think about creating content that adds value. It's funny, it's educational, it's inspiring. You're telling stories. Like we've got to get to a place where we view our social media not as a here's what's going on, but hey, here's how we can help you. Here's what we want for you. Here's some content that's going to make your life better. Or hey, we understand the pain that you're going through. Here's how you can, biblically deal with anxiety, whatever that content is. And as a church, the truth is we have an unlimited content source, aka the Bible. So, and coming up with content should not really be that difficult because we have the greatest book and the greatest stories all in one package. And so go to the Bible, take your pastor's sermons and put that content out there. And I promise you, people will engage. People will they'll respond. The other thing is I see a lot of churches aren't utilizing Google ads, Meta ads. If you want to go, you can go into Bing ads, TikTok ads, whatever. I recommend churches start with Google ads, investing some money in that. Like even if it's $100, letting people know, because we're battling for people's attention. People are getting thousands and thousands and thousands of messages and ads every single day. And so if you can invest in ads and go out to the people and say, hey, listen, there's a life-giving church right around the corner. We want to help you. We want to let you know that there's community here. If you need help, we're here. So really investing in ads is gonna set you apart, because most churches aren't utilizing even Google's ad grant. Most churches aren't using Google ads or any ads, at all. And you still got churches wasting money on mailers once or twice a year, and they wonder why no one's showing up from those, because people just throw them away. And so focusing on those little things can separate you from the pack, which I know we're not in competition, but we are about reaching people. And the way that you can reach people and reach your church people's friends and their neighbors and the people in your community is creating content consistently, running ads consistently, making sure that you're staying consistent on social media and your Google business profile. And doing those few things, starting there, I promise you're going to see an uptick of people coming in. Hey, I found you online. I found you on social media. I found you on Google. And I would recommend tracking those things too, so you can see, what your people coming into your church in your area, what they're responding to, and then you can dial that in. So those are some really simple things that really I believe any church can figure out. And if they're listening and you want more information, we'll drop some links, but you can reach out to me and whatever I have to help you, I would love to help and share. So you can do these things and start reaching more people online.
I always say too, if you really want to get this going, just deputize a millennial and get them in connection with Jenny. That's
true.
Those are your 2 steps.
There you go.
Very true.
I think that's pretty much perfect. Yeah. What's interesting too is all of these things do have to work together, because everything you're saying is the same stuff, just new category, right? We got to do all of that really specific work, because if we don't do the specific work when reaching people or when trying to assimilate them and bring them into the family, it's the specifics that actually kill the whole process. It's not the values. Everybody's got the right values, but can we live out those values is always the question. And Google Business is actually how you live out the value, right? And it's the way that you write the sign on the wall, and it's the where you put the person. It's all about the little things in so many ways. I think in the same way as those 4 things really taking away from the ability to reach people, I think that, I whittled it down. I got a really long list. It's a bit of an annoying long list, but I've got a list of things that I think are the top 3 things that kill assimilation just in its tracks. From what I've seen, from what I've done, there's plenty of that. Most of this comes from personal experience. But I'd love to hit those before I hand it over to Greg, and he could talk through the actual system that'll actually work. But the top thing really comes down to the first 7 minutes. The first 7 minutes is how long it takes somebody on average to figure out if they're going to come back or not, which is terrifying, because that 7 minutes, half of it is spent in the parking lot.
Yep.
Which, oh no, in some cases, right? The parking lot's usually the worst place that we've got, but the research says that's how long it takes. It's actually a lot more forgiving, because people judge websites in less than 6 seconds. And also
Yeah.
one new study, this is terrifying, so I don't know if it's really true, and I don't know exactly the
No, I
details,
think
but
it's true. I think it's
well,
true.
no, this one's the worst. It's that people make a first judgment of someone's character in a tenth of a second. One blink is all it takes. So 7 minutes is a long time. It's loads of time, and we can do a lot in that amount of time. But the question really is, are you effectively communicating positively to new guests as opposed to just not communicating negatively? You're not shooing them away, but are you inviting them in? Are you telling unchurched people, de-churched people who have been hurt by the church, maybe who are taking, like, stepping way out on a limb to show up? Are you proving to them in those first 7 minutes, you are in the right place, you made a great decision, and you're going to be fine? You're going to be fine. There's no lightning bolt waiting for you. You're going to be okay. That's the real question about those first 7 minutes. The next one that I think I see most commonly, this is the one that I've been most guilty of most times, is too many options and not often enough. Without this clearly targeted system that's specifically designed just for guests to become connected serving members, we end up in this feast and famine cycle of ministry overload and competition, because it's those like 2 times a year, right? It's the fall launch and the January launch. We shove everything into those times when everybody else in the world is shoving everything into those times. All the sports, the school, the plays, the everything gets in these couple moments. And so these 2-3 times a year, we then also don't tell them one thing we want them to do. We tell them A, B, C, or D, and to choose. And then they always choose E, which is none of the above, because it's just overload. And we try and give them this freedom and these options, but really we're just giving them this big headache. And it's on us to communicate clearly and at the exact right time with an opportunity that's designed for them, because it's all about, even the Google ads. I think that was a beautiful picture, because Google ads don't go out and find people. Google ads are responsive. So when somebody shows up to Google and says, I need help, I need a church, I need to find God again, that's when you show up. It's as soon as they're ready. And so in this same way, it's like, as soon as you're ready, while the iron is still hot, we're ready to help you become a part of this thing. You don't have to wait 6 months because it's October and you have to wait till February, you know? And so the feast and famine cycle is a big one. The last thing is like, it's this first 6 months. So we got the first 7 minutes, and then you convince them and it works. But then we've got that 6-month timeline. The other research would show that if a person doesn't have meaningful relationships and a place they feel like they're contributing, after about 6 months, their engagement is either like locked in as it is, attender only, consumer, staying on the fringes, all things we complain about with people, or they're just gone, right? Or maybe it's they're an attender only for a while and then they're gone as soon as something happens, or as soon as COVID hits, or as soon as whatever. But humans just aren't designed to stick around somewhere where they don't belong and they're not contributing. And so it's not that we have to guilt people into those things or obligate them into those things. We actually have to welcome people into them, because that's how they know that they actually do belong. We actually have to have them contribute as well. And so those are the things that are hindering assimilation. But Greg, you've really dialed in at Eastside and then tested it in a million other places, this easy system that actually does work, as opposed to just me talking about stuff that doesn't work. So why don't you walk us through that system?
Yeah. And this system is based on a reality that is not obvious. And the reality that seems obvious is your churches grow when there's more outreach. And I'm telling you, they don't. Now, that sounds crazy. I'm not anti-outreach, believe me. But I have worked, I like to tell the story of working with a network of 17 churches in South America once that did incredible, well-attended, crowd-producing outreaches up, and they averaged in those churches 4 per year. And then I asked, how many of your churches have grown in the last decade? One of the 17 made this symbol.
Wow.
You don't grow through that. You can touch lives, you can encounter people, get people on a mail list, do whatever kind of stuff. But you grow only by the number of those that you connect. That's the basic line. And the reality is, the bird in your hand is always worth the two in the bush, right? It's an old saying. bird in your hand, the one that you have in your door inside your facility, is always worth more than those birds out in the outreach bushes out in the community. Why? Because a a person who shows up at your church, again, with some of the things that Chandler has said, are people that are going through some kind of a winter or loss in their lives, and it's made them look for God. So they went on Google
Yeah.
to find maybe a church that could help them or something that could help them. And somehow your church came up and they probably watched it online, then they decided to actually come. Do you think you have a better chance connecting that person than you do somebody who showed up at some kind of an outreach event on the community? Of course you do. Another one is somebody that maybe a family that somebody in your church, another family in your church, has been inviting for years, and maybe even using some of the social media assets you gave them in order to do that, over time, sending this, sending that. And it was this weekend they chose to come. So they come pre-connected. Do you think you have a better chance of adding that person to your church and seeing it grow than one that encountered out in an outreach event? And your church, I don't care who's listening right now, every one of you has guests. I don't care how small, if you have a 100-person church, 100 to 200, you have at least 5 or 6 a weekend that are coming to your church in some form. I mean, a family usually is maybe 4 people, but they're coming every week. And I keep thinking this haunting question is, what parent would keep giving an allowance to a kid who lost it every week? And yet we're wanting to grow. But the bird in your hand is always worth more than the one in the bush. So how do you connect and capture those birds, so to speak? And it's really a 4-part system to move people from a first-time guest to a connected serving member, like we said earlier. I call it the 4 Ps, and I came up with this because I found myself I've worked with churches as small as 30 and as large as 22,000. And I've worked in 7 different countries. I have seen these processes out in the bush in mossy land in Kenya. I have seen them in the campos of South America. I have seen them in the urban settings in the US. They all have a version of these 4 Ps if they are a congregation that connects new people well. The first one is you send guests to only one place. It's one place to identify guests. That you're not announcing your women's ministry event, your men's work day, the latest this, the latest that. You are giving them, everybody who just wants one thing to say yes or no to. If you don't do that, like Tommy said earlier, you give guests multiple choice, they will always choose D, none of the above, because you and I do the same thing when we're in a new environment. We don't want to be overwhelmed. Just tell me what you want, and you have to decide what it is. And the most important thing you can do is to get their contact information in exchange for some kind of a welcome gift. Out in the Maasai land, the welcome gift was a little cake a woman was making so that they could get their cell phone number. Because even though we were out in Maasai land, out in the middle of just, it took me 2 hours in a Jeep to get there. They all had cell phones, flip phones. And that's how they did. And they got the information to identify the guests. Why? Because you can't even build a relationship with anybody till you can contact them. I always say they're not your girlfriend till you got their phone number, and they're not your guest till you got their contact info. It's priority 1. So you send them to one place to identify them as guests, get their contact info, welcome them, give them a gift. One program. Then you drive them to your one program, whatever program that you would have that creates an environment that automatically gets them into the 3rd P, which is your 2 processes, your small group placement process and your volunteer placement process. Because belonging is a 2-sided coin, and you got to do it in 4 to 6 months or they start to wander off and then they're gone within the year. But they have to find some friends, like in a small group, about 4 to 6 people who know them by name and they know them by name and some general stuff about them. Because friends say you're wanted here. A job, volunteering, the ministry team says I'm needed here. And being wanted and needed are 2 sides of the belonging coin. So you have to get through that one program. You have to get them into 2 processes that land them in the final P, the 2 placements, a small group or whatever your community environment is at your church, but most likely a small group, and a ministry team. So basically the system is one place to identify guests, one program to connect them, two processes to move them along and two placements to secure them. I have friends and I'm wanted here, and I have a job and I'm needed here. So that's the system I have found that works universally. I don't care what size church you are or where you are. And when you do that, your church will grow because you're connecting those who are coming to you.
And it's wildly effective, especially because it's not so restrictive. The ways in which I've watched, now that we've been doing this together too, the ways at which I've watched this get expressed, this system, it's wild. It's totally different in totally different places. And it's incredible because that's what a good system is. It's purely adaptable. You could plug it in anywhere, and it should take on the essence of the context that they're in. And I think that's the best part about it. So some things that you could do now as you're starting this is the most important thing is to start with assessing your current setup. And really it's like even that secret shopper kind of experience. If you've got somebody that's really good at that, taking off all of the regular, rose colored glasses, and we love everything that we do, put on that target demographic, that person you're really, really trying to reach, the hardest person to reach too in your context, but the one you're aiming for. Look at everything, listen to everything, and attend everything through their eyes, and imagine, where does something break down for that person? Yeah. Where the ladderless like crevices that people can't make it over no matter how hard they try. And where do they get confused, tripped up? Where does the process break down? What noise is blocking out the clarity that you wish that these newcomers had? If you can get to that spot where you really are dialing that in, then you start to understand what needs to change. But really assess the current setup and plug it into that system. Where are we consistently asking people to go? Is it confusing or not? Where are we inviting them to go to get connected? And is it working?
The
How often is it
simplest
happening?
thing to do, really, that we've been able to provide for people is to get them a checklist. And so when I mentioned these 4 Ps of the system, I just made 4 checklists, one for each P, and they're just 1 page each. But what I find is most churches have pieces of these 4 Ps, but they've not connected them together into a cohesive sequential process or strategy that actually ends up turning a first-time guest into a connected serving member. So the checklist is really a questionnaire that asks yes or no, because some of the things you already have, that's a yes. And then when you're done, you just take all the no's in order, and that's your real checklist. So it customizes to the church. That's totally free. Just go on assimileas.com, and if you go there.
The first time I saw the checklist and we started working together, I said, Greg, you just gave away the whole thing, right? In the free checklist. You're supposed to make it, but that was the beauty of it, is really like it's wildly comprehensive. And so it's a great place to start. And it helps you, like I said, do that assessment process, which is perfect.
And it's the kind of thing where you could get a team of people, whether volunteer or a staff team, and just delegate one of the 4 Ps checklist to a specific one and just kind of work through that. But a lot of churches want a little bit of extra coaching with that. So probably one of the best things that you can do is get access to the Climbing the Assimileas video course. We call it Climbing the Assimileas because the idea is that everybody thinks connecting a guest at their church is a coast because they're a friendly church, right? Which really means they're friendly to each other. And so what it is it's not a coast for a newbie, it's a climb, and they all deserve a Sherpa to kind of help them reach that summit of full connection with God and other people. So we just kind of leverage that image to that we're helping guests climb the Assimileas, so to speak. And what we do is, and what we've done is create the Climbing the Assimileas video course that is meant to coach you in about 6 sessions, and your team, you can just show it to them, and it has questions, and it lines up with the checklist so that you can actually get it done. And of course, we do some other things like cohorts that we're going to reboot starting this year. We do those quite often. And we do base camps where we come out and work with your entire staff for a couple of days, and just different kinds of offerings. But the main thing is, my passion is to help create Sherpa style leadership and cultures in churches everywhere so that we can take the birds in a hand that God's giving us, basically, and turn those first-time guests into vital, connected, serving members, which is the baseline of making a disciple, right? The missing baseline.
Mhm.
And by in so doing, our churches will grow and thrive.
Definitely.
Awesome.
We've got a few minutes here. If anybody in the audience wants to ask a question, hey, there you go. What's the most effective gift for a guest that's not self-promoting? You nailed it on the self-promoting part.
Oh boy, did they!
You don't have to put your logo on it. Put something that somebody would go like, hey, that's just cool. I like that. Something that's good for them is nice. We did a mug for a long time. Mugs might be going out of style. I think
Yeah.
everybody has 8
Yep.
million mugs. But Greg, I love what you guys do, and you guys have this in your church just practically because of wanting this for new people. So what do you guys do? Tell them.
Well, do you remember when I gave the example of the Maasai in Kenya that we're making cakes? And I know that in South America, where they have some of the best coffee in the world, it was some fresh brewed coffee in exchange for their contact info. What I'm telling churches now is, especially in the States, is give them a meal at some kind of a food item. And what we have is a grill, and that sounds like, oh my gosh, well, our church can't build a restaurant. You know what our grill is it's a Home Depot barbecue with some great volunteers who love to flip burgers and make burgers and hot dogs. And they have like some kind of a portable fridge with some soft drinks. And they make that every weekend, and people hang out and build community, and you give it for free, a little card. You might charge your people a very small amount to make it affordable for
Just
them.
pay for it. Yeah.
These are like $3 to $5 combo meals, so to speak.
Yeah.
But just give them free food that has value to them for their whole family. That's what we do, and that's the number one
immediate
draw
value.
is that combo meal.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. Just it's not self-promoting. It says, "Come be with us." Gather around a table, come be with us. And I think that works real well these days.
And I agree. Our church will do gift cards to a coffee shop, but what we also do is we let people know that if they fill out a first time guest, we do a QR code, and if they fill that out, we tell them that we make a donation to an organization that we're partnered with that helps feed a child for 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, when they fill that out, not only do they get a gift, but they also we give a gift on their behalf to an organization that basically provides food and shelter for a less fortunate kid across the world somewhere. So it's a way to say, hey, just by you being here and connecting with us, we want to do an outreach, or we want to give on your behalf.
Yeah, it's a great chance to like prove your values and also just do something nice for somebody really fast. Like I said, you don't have to prove everything to them. You just got to prove something to them, and it has to be about them and meeting their real needs. And as a person with children too, I'm like, you want to feed my kids lunch? Great, let's do that. That sounds great.
Yeah.
Have some gluten-free bread somewhere in a freezer. That would be really helpful though for one of my kids. So, but yeah.
Tommy, Greg, thanks so much for being on. This conversation was actually really helpful to me. I look forward to going through that checklist and sending it to my team. And thank you for everyone listening. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us on Instagram. We'd love to connect. Any questions that you have later down the road with checklists, make sure and connect. Check out their courses. I promise you, they're going to help. They're going to help you create a process that will help people get plugged in faster. So make sure you do that. Have a wonderful week, and we will talk to you soon.